Hey everyone, welcome back to the Optimization Toolbox Podcast, or if you're listening on YouTube, welcome. I have a special guest here, Chelsea. She is a functional medicine doctor, I believe, and she is someone that I know from my local mastermind, and she has been super helpful in teaching us in the mastermind all about the space of wellness and health, and it's something I'm personally interested in, so I wanted to have her come on to talk about some of the things that she teaches to her audience online as well as in person with all of her clients. So, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me, Jenna. Yeah, my name is Chelsea. Kaz-Goethel is the whole last name. I am a holistic practitioner, functional nutrition practitioner. And for myself and for my clients, I really work to specialize and live at the kind of intersection between the function of our body and how we are, how are we feeling? How is our body doing? How are we functioning? And how we are living energetically as like beings, right, as souls. And so I really looking at what we're doing for our health from not only a health optimization but a life optimization perspective. And I'm thrilled to be here to talk about hormones and whatever else,
Yeah.
wherever else we go.
Well, I'm excited because we have talked about hormones a little bit on this podcast, but not like in depth about how it impacts the rest of our body. Because I think it was very specifically like with ADHD and like how it affects like your brain. But I'm really curious how, because I've done a ton of research myself on the female hormone cycle, but also just a lot of different things in the life. And I'm curious how you got into this and kind of what do you think you specialize the most in? Because I feel like I know you talk about a bunch of different topics, but can you kind of explain kind of the overall arching thing of all the things that you do?
Yeah. So there's a funny quote or saying in like functional medicine in that world where practitioners, doctors will say, you either got into this because you were really smart and you recognize like, oh, we need to look at bodies and health differently, or you got into this because you were sick and you needed to do something different for yourself. And so for me, that's really where my kind of holistic health and functional medicine journey started was with my own health in my early 20s. And a lot of that was very, very hormonal based. And that's one of the reasons why hormones are really one of the main things that I talk about. And that certainly means menstrual cycles, right? Like working with young women, teenagers, brand new menstruators, all the way up to that perimenopause menopausal phase of life. Like our periods are very important, almost considered like the sixth vital sign. So I do put a lot of time and a lot of emphasis into that. But like you said, our hormones and beyond just our menstrual cycle hormones, they affect our entire lives, the function of our entire body. And it's so much more than just, yep, I have cramps and I don't like my cramps. Like what does that mean is going on in your body? And that tells us things about your gut health and your liver and your detoxification and your inflammation levels that then affect everything else that you're doing, and the things that you're able to do in your life. So really kind of got here with my own journey and have stuck around and really dug into what it means to have optimized hormones so you can have an optimized life, right?
Yeah, and oh gosh, I get like chills because I'm so excited about this because it's like I want to make sure that I'm living the best life possible, and that's why I changed the name of this podcast because I was like, how do I optimize everything? So for me, I don't think a lot of us were taught much about the menstrual cycle in school. Like, yeah, your period comes once a month. That's like about it. We didn't explain that there's four stages in the
Mm-hmm.
menstrual cycle. Like I didn't know any of this until like I was in my late 20s.
Yeah.
And it's something that you've dealt with your whole life and women just we just don't know this stuff. And it's like one of the things I do want to talk about because I did reach out to you and I was like, let's talk about ways to optimize the cycle, like whether that's the food that you eat, exercises that you do, because this to me is the most fascinating part. And I actually made a Canva document where I went
Ooh.
through each specific phase and I wrote down things like, oh, during this time of the month, during this stage, you should be doing this for like you're more productive or you're more emotional, or like so that I know. And then
Mm-hmm.
I also set it up on my calendar to tell me what phase I'm in right now.
Oh, that's
Based off,
amazing.
yeah. So it's like I'm really trying. Unfortunately, my cycle is not like regular. Like I don't have
Mm,
like a normal like 28-day cycle like a lot of people. So I
yeah.
never know when it comes, but I'm like at least it kind of helps me track it. And then I recently got the Apple Watch. I don't know if you've seen this, where it tracks your wrist temperature at night when you're
Yeah, your basal
sleeping.
body temp. Yep.
So I just started doing that because I'm like maybe that'll help me know when it comes a little bit better.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I just want to be, again, optimizing my life and just tracking it better. Cause I'm very much I like to track things. I weigh
Hmm.
myself every day. So I like to know where I'm at. So it's like, same with like this stuff. It's like, I would like to know when I wake up, what am I going to be like today and how do I best like make my life better and
Hmm.
optimize. So can you kind of explain, maybe, I know if you haven't listened to the past episode or maybe you know this, but like, can you kind of explain like the 4 phases of the cycle and then also just some like general knowledge about each one and kind of like what we can do to optimize those?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of what you're describing, we would call like cycle syncing, basically. Like, how do you sync what's happening in your life based on what's happening in your hormones? A lot of this concept comes out of like pretty brand new research, which is a little bit alarming that it's new and it's
Mm-hmm.
2023, but we're happy to have at least some idea of what's going on or more of an idea of what's happening. Everyone in general is familiar with the circadian rhythm, right? Our sleep wake cycle, it's the same throughout the entire 24 hours. This is why we get jet lag. This is what gets messed up when we travel or have really big disruptions to our sleep. It's our, when am I awake? When am I asleep? And what body functions are going on throughout that clock. Same day after day. And that's the cycle that men live on, right? They're the same pretty much every day. Maybe not every day, but they want to think so, right? So for women, we have a circadian rhythm, but we also have an infradian rhythm, which is what our menstrual cycle functions on, right? So generally it's about 28 days, and technically we'd say normal is maybe 24 to 32-ish, depends on who you ask, but there can be some days on the sides of that. And throughout that cycle, our bodies are changing every single day. And so we can sync up with those changes to know when is it the best time to be social, to go for more exercise, to be more restful. So if we look at the cycle, like you mentioned, there's 4 phases. Interestingly, even though we call our menstruation, our bleeding, our period, that's actually the start of the cycle, which is a little trippy. I'm still trying to figure out why we call that the period because it's not the end, it's the beginning. But here we are.
Yeah.
So our menstrual cycle, right? Day one is the day one, the first day that we bleed. And this could actually be considered, I like looking at it from a seasonal perspective. This is like our winter, right? So think about in winter, and we're in it right now here in Minnesota. It's sunny today at least, but generally in winter, we are more tired. We're more introspective, right? We want to rest. Maybe we go on a walk and that feels like a really big win. We're often not setting like our personal bests in winter. We're more restorative. This is a really good time. Think about almost like a New Year's resolution or setting intentions. Like the menstrual cycle, or menstruation, this kind of phase one, is a really good time to do that and journal and meditate and just kind of rest and honor what your body needs. Because if you think about menstruation, right, you're bleeding, that takes a lot of energy and you're losing nutrients through that menstruation, right? So we think about, I think about, hopefully you do as well, kind of the 3 pillars would be movement, food, and then how am I taking care of myself, kind of self-care. So movement, this is a really good time for restorative yoga, walking, lots of stretching. People really love like the legs up the wall yoga
I
pose or
do
like
that every
child's
day.
pose.
I do
Yeah.
that okay, I have to say this. I do this, yeah, where you have your legs up on the wall. I do
Hmm.
that while I meditate. So
Oh,
I know. I just started doing it this week. I was like, "Oh, I should." It like combines like cuz you're supposed to do it for about 10 minutes.
yeah.
I do my 10-minute meditation. I'm listening to my insight timer and I'm laying on my back and I put my legs up and that's how I do my
Okay.
meditation.
Life hack. Doing that tomorrow morning. Like
I don't know why I haven't posted about this yet, but I was like, I just started doing that and it was game changing.
I'm and I'm like excited. I'm like, I might meditate when we're done here today. I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, that's genius. Which is the reason that's wonderful is because it's really good for your lymphatic system. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll talk about at some
Oh my
point in
gosh,
time, right?
I just read the book of lymph. I don't know if you've read that one.
Oh, beautiful.
I just got really excited about that too. So
Yes.
I'm just like
Oh,
really into that.
and it's fabulous. It helps just with, we think about lymph as like actually physically, what is lymph doing? Delivering
Mm-hmm.
nutrients, moving
Yes.
garbage, but it's also very energetic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you want to move. You want to restore. From a food perspective, from a nutrition perspective, when we're in, like when we're around our bleed, so when we're actually bleeding just before and kind of just after, we tend to be potentially a little bit more insulin resistant. So we're going to see higher blood sugars, right? Without getting too far down the rabbit hole, we don't want high blood sugars, right? We want
Mm-hmm.
kind of optimized blood sugar. So this is a time when it's better to do less less carbohydrate, less sugar, right? Which is counterintuitive because leading up to our periods, we crave sugar, right? And often we want those sweet things. And I do think a part of that is a little bit of a programming of what we grew up with, right? As young girls, every sitcom is a woman crying into a bucket of ice cream before she starts bleeding, right? And like, but there's also reasons because our blood sugar is a little higher than we crave a little bit more. So it's a little counterintuitive to go, oh, I'm about to have my period. I actually, even though I want sugar, I should eat less of it because that's going to be more beneficial and it's going to help lower inflammation, help reduce pain throughout our cycle. This is a good time to focus on foods that are anti-inflammatory and high in antioxidants. We think about berries, we think about fatty fish, we think about just really a wide variety of nutrient dense foods. And again, kind of leaning into your whole food, really complex carbohydrates versus the like quick, fast burning carbs, like our white bread, pasta, rice, that kind of thing. Um, Tea can be really good during this time, right? Because it's warm. Again, think winter, it's warming. People love soups and stews. And then iron can be something that you want to focus on as well. Some people will supplement iron. I don't recommend that unless you know you need to if you have low iron in lab work. But thinking about, of course, red meat, poultry, fish, beans, lentils, dark leafy greens, dark chocolate, right? So find like a nice actual dark chocolate, not a Hershey's bar. Um, Nuts, seeds, that kind of thing that's going to help bring those nutrients in that help your body kind of fuel what it's doing, kind of fuel the shedding. And then from a life perspective, meditation, solo time, we're not as social in the winter. I don't want to leave my house when it's really, really cold out. Maybe I don't want to be social when I'm bleeding, right? We're more restful. And again, kind of that like setting intentions for the next phase, because then we get into what we call the follicular phase, right? And this has to do with what's happening with the follicles, right? Where our eggs live. We won't get too far into that, but this is our spring. So you think about winter is over, it's sunny, it's getting warmer, we're starting to see grass, we're going to see estrogen and testosterone start to rise, and we're going to have more energy. And this is a really good time to like start to get stuff done. And this is where we set an intention while we were bleeding. Now I'm ready to like act on that. I'm going to do projects. I'm going to check things off my to-do list. I'm going to tackle that room that I need to organize in my house. You have more mental and body energy. And that can mean that for movement, this is where we do want to be more active, that higher intensity cardio and strength training. Maybe a good time to try a new exercise class or go to an exercise class with a friend because we're more social during this time. We just tend to be a little bit more outgoing and energetic. Nutritionally, because we do become more energetic and we become more active, you want to make sure that you're getting plenty of good protein and start to up the carbohydrates again here in this phase. Kind of around menstruation, we're lower carb. Around ovulation, which we'll talk about next, we're a little bit higher carb. And we need more carbohydrates for what the body is doing hormonally. This is because we have better insulin and blood sugar control. This is a good time if women want to experiment with fasting. This can be an appropriate time to do that. 12, 14, 16 hours. I do always really emphasize for women, make sure you're paying attention to how you feel. Jenna, I think you do some fasting.
I do. I just read the book Fast Like a Girl by Mindy Peltz, which
yeah, she's
I love
awesome.
because she does talk about the menstrual cycle in the book and how you're supposed to kind of the best times to do it.
Exactly.
And it's there has never been a book about fasting that really applies to women and specifically hormones. And so I was like, I had been looking for that because I remember years ago I tried intermittent fasting and I looked for stuff on this and there was nothing. And this was probably before Mindy was even making content on this. And so now I do I usually do a 36-hour fast. I don't do intermittent fasting. I do like a fast once a week. So for me, and I actually just switched it. I was doing Sundays. Now I'm doing Mondays because actually during the workday, you can actually become very focused when you are in the fasting state. So I actually found that like doing a workday and having a fast was actually really, really helpful. So that's been really good.
Well, you get that really high energy or that really high level of like brain fuel, right? That autophagy that really just keeps you going. So for females, right, this would be a time to experiment with that. But again, just really pay attention. Most fasting research, kind of like what you're alluding to, is done on men, and they have that same cycle every day, and they tend to tolerate fasting better. So if you're noticing like, oh yeah, I'm trying some fasting. I'm pushing my breakfast time back, but I'm a little lightheaded. I'm kind of grouchy. I'm groggy. I'm a little nauseous. That just might mean that you need to eat. And it's okay to not force fasting. It isn't for everybody. In my own journey, I've done a lot of fasting. I've done it really well and smart and in a healthy way. I've also done it in a way where I'm like, if I don't get to 20 hours, I'm failing at this. And that is not healthy for your body or your mind. So just avoid that. If you feel like, as long as I have another cup of coffee, I'll be just fine. It's probably time to just eat some food. Learn from me. If your eyes are bulging out of your head, please break your fast. I heard someone say, if you couldn't balance your checkbook, please break your fast. And I was like, I don't know if I don't really know how to do that anyway. So
That's
I'm not going
something
to use that
I'm
rule.
working on that right now. I literally was downloading a budgeting app right before this call. So it's definitely another thing I'm trying to optimize is my money. So
Also important. Also important. Okay, so yes, nutritionally, a good time for fasting. During this time, we have more estrogen and more testosterone. This is where a lot of that energy comes from. So we also want to be thinking about what can we do to make sure that my body is appropriately getting rid of excess estrogen. We want balance in our hormones. So we don't want to have a ton of estrogen or no estrogen, but we want to use things like food that are naturally going to help our body regulate those levels. So we think about like leafy greens, cruciferous vegetables, fermented foods, things that are going to help, lots of fiber, right? Things that are going to help keep us regular and keep the gut moving, which helps the liver detox, which supports those healthy estrogen levels. Excess estrogen, right? That's a state that a lot of women are in where we have too much of it, or maybe we have a correct amount, but low progesterone or correct progesterone and high estrogen. Either way, those ratios are off. And that's a lot of what leads to the hormonal symptoms that women deal with, right? Acne and headaches and pain and cramps and all of these different things. Again, more carbs during this time, especially if you are doing higher intensity exercise. You want to use some carbohydrates for recovery, right? Potatoes, sweet potatoes, fruit, maybe some, whole grains, some oats, stuff like that. And again, this is a time in our life to be more social, tackle that to-do list. Women will often experience a higher libido during this time as well, and especially into kind of phase number 3, which is our ovulatory phase when we ovulate. So just if you are not trying to conceive, this is a time to be careful with your bedroom activities if you are not trying to get pregnant. Or if you are, go for it.
Yeah.
So we get into phase 3, that's our ovulation. And this is technically like the middle of the cycle. So day 14 plus or minus a day on either side. And this is like our summer. We have the highest estrogen. We have the highest energy. Like you mentioned, body temperature. How do I know if I'm ovulating? Basal body temperature is a really good way to know. You see a spike in body temperature. So we're like running a little bit hotter. Our metabolism is moving a little bit faster. Women will also notice or should notice like a change in cervical mucus. So it's like, oh, things are a little different down there. Maybe some ovulation pain. You might feel a little bit of a ping or a pain on either side, kind of right around the hip bones. And when you are tracking your temperature, or if you're curious, you can also use the LH hormone strips to like figure out, did I have an LH spike that indicates that then I did ovulate.
Can you explain that? I don't know what that is.
Yeah. So especially as you get like used to using and tracking your temperature, what you'll see is your temperature spikes. And the reason that happens is because estrogen spikes and then luteinizing hormone, LH, it's just LH. LH hormone is luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone then triggers ovulation. So if we see when estrogen spikes and then LH spikes, we can't measure estrogen as easily, but we can measure LH with urinary test strips. When that spikes, then we know, okay, ovulation is what comes next. So you can confirm ovulation that way when you see that temperature spike. The app Natural Cycles, if you've heard of that, and if you like tracking, that graphs it all out for you, like graphs your temperature out for you, and will tell you like, hey, it's a good day to take an LH test because we think you might be ovulating based on your temperature and your other symptoms and things like that. That's what I use, is the Natural Cycles app. And then I have the Aura Ring that does body temp as well.
Yeah, I've always been curious about that because I use an Apple Watch. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to do both, but I'm like, because I use the Apple Watch for other things, more for fitness and stuff. But I've also heard of like Whoop. I don't know if you know much about Whoop.
The Whoop, but like the strap that you wear that does temp. Yep.
I mean, there's like lots of options now, and maybe I'll do a whole episode on just fitness trackers because I feel like that's so interesting, and I think for because the Oura Ring, a lot of that is sleep too, right? A lot of that is sleep.
a lot of like sleep and recovery. So it looks at like heart rate and heart rate variability, body temp, oxygen. They've added a bunch of new features to it, which is really cool. I picked the Aura Ring because I'm just not like a good screen person. And I was like, I don't need like someone being able to get to me on my wrist. But it's been great. And for people who like data, finding the right tool for them. Yeah, there's a Whoop strap, obviously
Yeah.
Fitbit. There's also one that's specific for temp. I believe it's called the Temp Drop that you strap
Oh.
onto your arm at night, and it tracks basal body temp, and that's pretty much all it does.
Mm.
But it's really accurate, which is cool. Back in the day, I used to use like an old school thermometer to track my
Yeah.
temp, and the like beeping of the thermometer was putting a little bit of strain on my marriage at 5 a.m. So
Mm.
I was happy to upgrade to the Aura Ring. I was like, no more beeps.
Yeah.
We
That's
happily, I think my
that's
husband
good.
actually spiked it into the garbage can,
Oh, funny.
the thermometer when we were done. So yeah, so we come up on phase 3, and that is ovulation, right? Now, to back up briefly 1 second, that menstruation is like our new moon, where ovulation is like our full moon. And that's important if we're going to talk about seed cycling and irregular periods. So we'll come back to that. But ovulation is like our summer. It's full moon, it's bright, we're high energy. This is what some people would consider, if you look at it from like a both a manifestation realm and a like life realm, this is kind of our like attraction time, right? If you're ovulating, you're attracting you want a partner. If you wanted to conceive, right? You're feeling good, you look good. We're usually less bloated during this phase of our cycle, and we have more energy and kind of more magnetism to pull things to us and attract things. So this is where we set an intention, we kind of start to take action on it, and we should see some of those things flow in. I heard a woman who does marketing and talks about marketing in relationship to our hormones, talk about like, if you're a business owner, I know,
I
right?
need
I
to.
was
Who
like,
you need to
tell
send me
me
this person
more.
because I'm like I
Yes.
need that.
Yeah, she's here in the Twin Cities. I'll share her
Oh,
with you for
I
sure.
will
Yeah, her name is
definitely.
Ashley.
Okay, I'll definitely. We'll talk about it after the episode.
Yeah, she's awesome. But she was like, if you're a business owner, this is the time to like put out like a content push or a new offer or release something new, because you're in a better place for communication. This is a very social time, high libido, high energy, friends, like very creative time. So if you are, if you're noticing, and we were talking about this just recently, like I was like, oh, I'm having like some blocks to doing some writing or creating some content. It was like, oh, I'm not in a high energy creative phase. So I'm just going to recognize that and do the best that I can, instead of being mad that I didn't get 45 things done on my list, and know that that time is coming where I will feel more creative. So we're coming up on that now. I'm very excited. This is still a good time for high intensity movement, whether it's cardio or weights or classes. But some women will find that their energy dips a little bit when it comes to like physical energy, because ovulation does take energy. There's a whole estrogen spike, LH, like that egg's got to like, things are moving. And so that takes a lot of energy. So we may find like, ooh, yesterday I did, high intensity intervals. Today I actually just want to go on a walk or do yoga. And it's okay to tune in and hear that. We continue in a similar nutritional pattern here, where we want those foods that are going to help us with like gut health and detoxification, fiber, cruciferous veggies, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels, leafy greens. Fatty fish is really good during this time. We can still be a little more like moderate carbohydrate as well. So some whole grains, like people will do, really full salads with some quinoa in there. They'll do more oatmeal, that kind of thing. Higher sugar fruits, higher carb fruits. Oftentimes we have a higher appetite during this time because our body is using so much energy. And so it's okay, wonderful to recognize that and just honor that. Instead of going, oh no, I shouldn't be hungry, just eat a little more. Just choose those things that are nourishing for you. We want to pay attention to the liver during this phase as well. So we think about like bitter greens. So if you're doing a salad, adding in some, think of the bitter ones, the arugula and the like watercress. It's not too bitter, but that kind of thing. Some of those like special greens that we don't just make a whole salad out of, or doing tea like green tea or dandelion root tea or ginger lemon, that's going to support the liver, because your liver is a huge part of what's detoxifying that extra estrogen. And then your gut is what is really finalizing the process of getting rid of estrogen and balancing out those levels. There's a massive connection between the gut and the hormonal system, which is a big part of what we talk about in kind of functional medicine, functional nutrition. I will meet women frequently who are like, well, I have hormonal issues, but I don't have any gut issues, so we don't need to talk about my gut. And it's like, well, we always need to talk about the gut. We all know the microbiome. We also have an estrobolome, which is basically the connection between estrogen and the microbiome. And so if there's something going on with hormones, we know there's something going on with the gut as well. Even if you have normal bowel movements and you're not bloated and you're not gassy, like there's still attention that needs to be paid to the gut. So really taking care of that through our food. And then, self-wise, self-love wise, very social time, be creative. We talked about this a little bit already. And if you are not trying to conceive, use some protection. Okay. So let me get to, right? I know. I'm like,
Yeah.
we get so excited about like optimizing our
Mhm.
cycles. And then what comes along with that is often improved fertility. So it's just something to be
Interesting.
aware of. And especially for people who aren't planning for kids, it's like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
there, that was a surprise.
Yep.
Turns out I'm healthier and now it was easier to get pregnant. And so just to be
Yep.
aware of that.
For sure.
All right. So phase 4, that's our luteal phase. This is what begins right day 14, 15 after we ovulate, and it brings us right up until the day before we bleed again, right? This is like our fall. So in the first part of this cycle, think about coming off of summer and heading into fall. We're generally still pretty energetic, right? We still want to do higher intensity, maybe moderate intensity activity. We like to go outside. We maybe want to go on a jog or do some lifting. But then as we get into the second half of this is really kind of a 2-week phase. As we get into week number 2, the second half, we start to feel a little bit lower energy, right? Because progesterone is the hormone that dominates in this phase, and it's not as energetic as estrogen and testosterone are. So we start to wind down and get more into that restorative movement. We become a little bit more introspective, and from a kind of seasonal and cyclical perspective, this is when we would kind of think back on what went well in the last cycle, right? Just like we would think back on our last year, what went well, what do I want to do more of, what do I want to do less of? So it's this kind of like reflective time. Movement wise, maybe more intensity and kind of tapering down. Stretching is really important during this time because there is that increase in progesterone, which can mean that our lymphatic system is doing a little bit more work. So we want to help support that lymphatic movement with gentle body movement. Food, we're going to think about kind of tapering down on carbohydrates again and focusing on still, always lots of veggies, lots of healthy fats. And this is important throughout the entire cycle. But fats are the building blocks of our hormones, right? So people who fear fat or this kind of low fat thing that I think we've left behind, you want to make sure that you're getting, your avocados and avocado oil and olives and fatty fish and olive oil and all these really wonderful things, because that's what makes up our hormones that helps us have healthy cycles. Foods that are rich in B vitamins. So really, this is where like eat the rainbow comes into play, because if we're eating a wide variety of generally like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and ideally a little bit of animal protein or as much animal protein as you feel comfortable with, then you're going to get your whole spectrum of B vitamins, and that can help with PMS symptoms. It supports our nervous system as well. And lots of hydration. Again, always important, but especially as we're coming into menstruation, think about like nourishing your body for that bleed, nourishing your body in the fall for winter. We want to think about heading into that period in the lowest stress state possible. Not always, we can't control everything, but the things that we can, because our bodies are going to be more stressed when we menstruate. Technically, it's a time of inherent stress. So the things we can control, right? High intensity movement can be stressful. We're not going to do a lot of that. Really heavy sauna use, probably not going to do a lot of that. This might not be the best time for fasting, and we may find that we're less tolerant to it, right? If you were going to try to like optimize your monthly schedule, your monthly calendar, right? This would not be the time for a really stressful work meeting. If you can control that, right? This would be the time for, I'm going to kind of wrap up my projects. I'm going to feel really good about what I did this month. And then I'm going to get ready to head into the next phase. I have a colleague who does not see clients during the second half of her luteal phase. Like the last week of her menstrual cycle, she's just like doing her content work or her like behind the scenes work. and doesn't do one-on-one work with clients because she feels less extroverted. She's much more introspective. She does more meditating and journaling and that kind of thing, and just does whatever she can to lower her stress, which is really wonderful. And when we can do that, it really is a beautiful privilege, right?
Yes. And I think this is so interesting because I think a lot of like women business owners, we were just talking about this. Yeah. Like there's certain times where we don't have the energy and all this stuff. So I think knowing your cycle and actually being able to apply all of these like learnings to your business as well. Cause it's like, we don't work the same as men when it comes to our energy and mood and sort of thing. So I think that this is super, super helpful for any woman that is, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you work a regular job. Like, I think knowing all of this information. The other thing that I've gotten really into is skin. So like I have it on my list. So like during the menstruation period, it's dry and dehydrated.
Mm-hmm.
During the follicular phase, it's calm, balanced, and glowy.
Mm-hmm.
As well as during ovulation. And then during the luteal phase, it's oily and acne prone. So I was like,
Yep.
that was fascinating to me too, because it's like, it affects all of the organs in our body, and our skin is our biggest organ, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think like just knowing that, like, I wish I had known that when I was going through acne and when I was, like the products I'm using so it's just like, it affects everything in our life and not just like, oh, we get it once a month. I think that's the biggest thing, is we don't think about the whole every day, how it affects us.
Right, right. Well, and it doesn't take, like there's so many tips in each category, right? And you could drive yourself crazy going, okay, I'm menstruating. I need to make sure I have this, and that. And now I'm ovulating and I need to do it. Doesn't take a lot to just gently shift. Like, okay, I know that right now I'm going to do my bigger workouts and I'm really going to emphasize leafy greens. Beautiful. During this phase, I know I really want to make sure I'm hydrated and I'm getting those really good essential fatty acids. Easy. I want to make sure I emphasize, my social time when it feels good, and just pay attention to my calendar and times where I might not be as social. Easy, right? Like it doesn't have to be this big complex thing, but having the awareness, right? Oh, my skin's looking a little crazy. What's going on? Oh yeah, I'm a little bit oilier right now and a little more acne prone because of what's happening with my hormones. Well, what's happening with my hormones affects the rest of my life. So then I want to check in with what I'm doing in other areas, right? It's really meant to be this, optimized is the best word for it. And I think that, as women, we have this, we grew up, I grew up thinking like I have to be on all the time, perfect. Like my mom was like this incredible, I think she slept like 3 hours the entire time I was growing up because she was just always like on and doing something and being amazing. And I'm like, how did you do that? But we have this expectation of like always being perfect all the time, high energy, spunky, involved, interested in things. And I recognized in myself, I was with a group of friends recently and I was like, I have to apologize. I am not like mentally focused on what's happening right now. I'm here and I'm happy to be here and kind of be in this like loving, friendly environment, but I'm not my best, most supportive friend. And I'm recognizing that that's part of just the phase that I'm in with my hormones. And so knowing that it's okay that we go up and down, that we have different preferences. What felt really good last week in terms of movement or activity or diet or whatever it is might not feel good this week, and that doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It just means that your body is cycling the way that it's supposed to, and understanding that and really almost taking our power back to use this to our advantage, right? Instead of feeling like I have to fight against my natural rhythms and my natural biology.
And that's really what I want, this specifically, like this podcast and all of the other things that I'm sharing, is like, yeah, we have to just utilize what we're given. And like we can't control that, but we can control how we react, right? Isn't that like the phrase? It's like we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we react to it. So it's like,
Absolutely.
if we're able to just have all of the things that we experience in this life, like for all of us, we go through different things, but it's like, if we can actually just take a little bit of that control back and say, hey, I know this comes every month, but if I can make it as the best experience as possible for myself, that's why like I'm so excited about this topic, and just making just the awareness of it. Like, I think a lot of people just don't know that there are ways to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
actually certain parts of, I was reading in that book Beyond the Pill about how certain things are not normal, like
Mm-hmm.
certain like really really heavy periods, or like extreme cramping, like that's not normal.
Yep.
And that is something that is like, there's something off. One thing I did want to ask before I forget is about hormone testing, because
Yeah.
I've gotten many answers from different podcasts about that. Like, oh, it does work. It doesn't work. I've heard Dutch tests. I've heard all these things. What is your opinions on the hormone testing, and what should we do? Because I've thought about doing it. I've never done it, but I'm
Mm.
curious on that.
Yeah, I would say the Dutch test is my favorite. It's what I have the most training in because I think it's the most comprehensive. It looks at not just like a spot, today here's your estrogen, your progesterone, and your testosterone, right? It looks at patterns and it helps us identify, like really dig in. Okay, you have high estrogen and normal progesterone or normal estrogen and low progesterone or whatever it is, but we can break that down and really figure out like why that might be happening. Is it a liver thing? Is it a mineral thing? Is it an antioxidant thing? Do we need to dig deeper into what's going on with your cortisol and your stress response and how that relates to the other hormones? So it gives the biggest picture. I also really love what it does with the cortisol and cortisone testing because it's not a spot test. It looks at the pattern throughout the day, what happens right when we wake up, shortly after, and then kind of the pattern. There should be a little bit of a bump and then a gentle decline that can really help us identify what's going on with someone's sleep or energy or brain fog. And then that ties into so many other things. I would say that's my favorite. It's comprehensive. It's a little bit more expensive than just going to your general provider and asking for a hormone panel. But it also lets us know if there's further investigation needed into the gut or into the liver or something like that.
Yeah, that's super helpful, because I think I want to do it at some point. It's just, yeah, it's like a lot of money. So it's like, I got to
Right,
make sure it's
right.
the right one or which one I should do. Cause I'm like,
Yeah.
I feel like I do have probably some like things I could be improving in terms of like levels, or maybe I'm low on this and I didn't know it. Like I can't tell unless I test it. So it's like, I don't
Yeah.
always know what the issue is. And I think especially a lot of women that have bigger issues than probably I do, whether it's thyroid or other things where they're out of whack. I don't think I'm super out of whack, but I also feel like I'm probably not at the best place, and maybe I've just been in it for so long that I don't
Right.
even know.
Well,
Uh,
there's clinically diagnosable things, right? Like we see on your labs that yes, you have hypothyroidism or whatever it may be. But there's this category of like subclinical where it's not as obvious. And so then we go, something's not terrible, but it's not optimized. Why and what can we do to have that get better instead of get worse, which is what happens for most of us. It's a slow, steady decline. And then when we finally get diagnosed, things have been going haywire for 5 or 10 or 15 years, but we can catch it before then and turn it around generally really safely and quite naturally, so that you don't end up with the big diagnoses later on.
That's so true. It's very preventative of the things
Hmm.
that could. One thing I wanted to ask too, and this might be kind of a little off topic, but it's kind of has to do with tracking, is
Yeah.
continuous glucose monitoring. I've
Yeah.
thought about doing that too, because they talk about that a lot in the fasting book, and I've never
Hmm.
done it. My brother's diabetic, so I know a lot
Hmm.
about like some of that, but I've never done it myself because I'm not
Yeah.
diabetic. But
Yeah.
and I know it's like become more popular for people that are just wanting to see how what they eat impacts their glucose. What are your thoughts
Yes.
on that?
Yeah, I think that they're fascinating. I caution against the CGM for people that have a history of disordered eating.
Mm, makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
and I think we all maybe have like a little history of disordered eating. Like I even recognize sometimes my relationship with food where I'm like, oh, I'm more hungry right now, but I shouldn't be hungry. I shouldn't eat. And then I'm like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
what would I tell my clients to do? Not that. So go ahead and have a
Yeah.
snack, Chels. But that's my biggest like asterisk
Mhm.
caveat is
Yeah,
if
yeah, yeah.
you know you have a tendency to get really fixated on food, there is a chance that it will lead to potentially a restrictive or anxiety provoking cycle. But if you are in a good place with your relationship with food and you just want to understand like how does my body respond to things, it's a beautiful tool. I like it because they're generally like a 2 week, 10 to 14 days is typically how
Mm.
long one will last. So it's not this like year-long thing where you're obsessed with everything that you eat for your entire 365 days. But it's fascinating because there are food is so bio individual, right? Like
Mm.
the exact diet that I eat, if you ate it, you might not feel exactly the way that you want to. And I think we're actually pretty similar, so it might work
Mhm.
out. But like my husband and I respond differently to different foods. And so really being aware of that. So even the perfect, like, think of a ketogenic diet, right? Low carb, high fat, really regulated blood sugar. There are keto foods and keto snacks that still spike your blood sugar. And it's like, oh, I didn't even know that was happening. So if I'm going to eat that, I'm going to be aware of the fact that I might have a spike and a dip, or I'm just not going to eat that. And I'm going to reach for things that I know are going to help me stay generally stable in my blood sugar because I want good energy and I want good brain function, right? So it gives you that information to know how your body specifically responds to things, despite what the marketing for that product says or what this book or that person or this
Yeah.
person says about that food. It's a really cool tool. And I really think they're fascinating to run. Like if you were going to do it like around your menstrual cycle, or to do
Mm,
two and do one around ovulation and one around menstruation and
interesting.
see the difference,
Hmm.
because we do tend to have higher blood sugar around our menstrual cycle. So it's almost this like, it just really helps kind of solidify like, what do I need to do for myself to take care of myself in these different phases. It's a really fun tool.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
I've thought about doing that too, because I'm like, again, I like to see the stats. I'm very much like,
Mm,
I like to see visually where I'm at. And one of the things I started doing that actually really helped my weight loss journey last year was I did start weighing myself every day.
mhm,
And I am not triggered by that for the most part. So it's like, that was really, to me, the biggest a thing that changed and improved my weight loss journey was just knowing, hey, this is what happened after yesterday.
mhm,
So it's like every day I'm seeing the individual effects of either what I ate or what I did with my activities to
mhm.
actually impact my day-to-day weight, which like
Absolutely.
I never tracked that. And so I
Mhm.
never knew where I was at. And
Yeah.
I never put two and two together of like, oh, all the things I did yesterday impact me today. And I think
Mm,
that's why I want to try some of these tools, because it's like, oh, I didn't realize that I'm low on this, or oh, I didn't realize that this specific food that I eat like is the biggest trigger ever for my blood, whatever, blood sugar.
mhm,
So it's like, I think for me, there are so many more tools now that just give us more insight into what's happening inside of our bodies, which I think
mhm.
we never had that until recently with all these new inventions, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, the biotech is incredible. And what I have to remember and remind myself and sometimes remind my clients of is that the tools that give us the data, like they're not fixing the problem, right? Like I read before I got the Aura Ring, I was reading reviews of it and people were like, it didn't make my sleep any better. And it's like, well, its job isn't to fix
It's
your
tracking it. It's
sleep.
not
It's
helping it. Yeah.
exactly like it's going to tell you what's going on. So then you can figure out, should I try some melatonin or valerian or meditation or brain dumping or journaling before bed? Or, oh, I'm realizing I'm waking up at this time. Can I
Mm-hmm.
talk to my provider about what that means potentially metabolically, right? It gives us data that then we get to act on. We get to gather that and understand it and act on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's meant to be really empowering, I think. And we all have times where we get really data obsessed, and it's like this is the slippery slope with the CGM of like, oh no, my blood sugar went up a little bit too much. I can never eat an
Mm-hmm.
apple again. Well, maybe you just need to balance that apple, as a carbohydrate. Maybe you
Mm-hmm.
need a little protein and fat when you eat it, or you just recognize that might happen. Like that's okay. But it's really cool and really empowering to have that information about our
Yeah.
bodies.
I heard a story once where people are like, if I eat a salad before I eat like spaghetti, it like
Mm,
makes my blood sugar not spike as much. I thought that was fascinating. Like stuff
yeah.
like that, where it's like I would have never known that, like just the order in which you eat things, or just
Hmm.
different ways. For me, it's like, the time I call it they call it like time restricted eating, where it's like I
Hmm.
learned you probably shouldn't eat after 6 p.m. I read a book on the circadian cycle, and they're
Yeah.
like, it's just probably best because like your body needs to like kind of digest the food. And so
Hmm.
I try to stop eating by 6, but like, it just depends on the day. But
Yeah.
like, so it's like there's things that I've learned about that. And so there's just like different, and again, everyone has their different methods, and everyone, has different theories about what works and what doesn't work. I know we're kind of running out of time a little bit. I know
All
I
good.
want to keep this under 45 minutes, but so last things, what are some tips and things that like you tell your clients all the time that could improve, whether it's their hormones or their life? Like what are some of the little things that you feel like people could walk away from this episode with that would improve their life?
Yeah. So I think if you are a female, right, and you're
Mm-hmm.
menstruating, like tuning into your cycle a little bit. Even Jenna, you mentioned that you set it in your phone, like when
Mm-hmm.
are my phases, right? When am
Mm-hmm.
I roughly menstruating? When am I ovulating? I
Yep.
know the Natural Cycles app, you can set it so it alerts you to that. So
Mm.
you know kind of what am I shifting into and what might I want to do from that movement, food, and kind of self-care perspective. So just syncing up with that a little bit in your life. Another big one, and I this is so simple, but it's important, and I think we sometimes forget about it, but it really is building in gratitude practices, right? Appreciative practices. I have made it a habit to start and end my day with easy little gratitude lists. I have a notebook next to my bed. I find that if I write them down, it kind of helps me embody that a little bit better. But waking up and starting the day with 3 things that I'm grateful for about my life in general, and 3 things that I'm grateful for about myself, and just really starting in that energy and ending the day the same way. So that's more of an energetic thing. And then the other one, in the morning when we wake up, again, very simple, but drinking water, drinking like 12 to 16 ounces of really nice filtered water before we drink or do anything else. And this has to do with our microbiome, right? Which we talked about, hormones and gut, and the gut is everything, gut, brain, all of the things. But our microbiome runs on a very similar circadian rhythm to our circadian rhythm. And so when we drink water, it helps like wake it up and get those bugs going, which is good for digestion and metabolism and our immune system and our brain function. And so I actually bring water with me to bed, and I write my gratitude list, I drink my water, and then I go about my day. And it's a nice little bonus at the end of the day when I'm like, did I drink enough water today? Oh, well, I know I started out well. So it's kind of that boost, and then go into eating or coffee or whatever it may be. So those would be my 3.
So helpful. And I feel like this, we could do like 8 episodes on, on all the things that you do. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely feel like I'm probably going to have so many more questions for you just offline, but how do we find you? How do we work with you? Do you do virtual work, or how does that work with people wanting to work with you?
Yeah, yep. So I do both virtual and in-person work here in the Twin Cities. My practice name is Kaz Functional Wellness. So Kaz, it's the root word for health and heal, and it means to make whole, sound, or well. So my website, if you wanted to find me there, is Kaz, which is KHAILAZ wellness.com. And there's more information about me and my practice, scheduling links for, virtual care or in-person care. And on Instagram, I'm chelsea.kaz, Kaz.Goethel, Goethel. And learning from you all about sharing and creating content, and, just really enjoying this phase of life where I get to communicate and share about the things that I'm really passionate about. So.
Well, I'm excited for people to hear this. I'm excited for them to follow you, because I know you're going to be coming out with some awesome content soon, especially on this topic. So if you want more, make sure to follow Chelsea, and I'll make sure to put her link in the description as well. But thank you so much for coming today. And everyone, I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Jenna.